I never got to say goodbye. I never got to hold his hand or touch his face one more time or touch his hair or hug him. I got to kiss a cold casket and hoped he knew how much I dearly loved him. Aaron Davis was brutally murdered by a close friend. It was tragic and horrifying, and just a few days ago, on July 18th of 2024, his murderer was sentenced. And we're going to talk about it. It's a crazy case, and it's a heartbreaking one. So hey, my true crime chocoholics, it's been a hot sec between life and chronic pain and other lovely things, but we're back and talking about the case of Aaron Davis, his unfortunate murder. This is a case where we have had some closure, if there is such a thing, at least closing it this chapter, getting some level of justice for his murderer, Brandon Risner, who was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole on July 18th of 2024. Who was Aaron Davis and Brandon? They were both members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as am I. They knew each other since about 8th grade on. They were great friends, very close. And it sounds like Brandon was a little quirky, but kind and gentle, and maybe a little socially awkward. They said later he was diagnosed with Tourette's and autism, as well as OCD and some anxiety issues and whatnot. You know, he and Aaron were good friends. Aaron's brother Luke as well spent lots of time at the Davis household. And Aaron and Brandon, and I believe Luke as well, were roommates at BYU, Idaho, which you will recall is in Rexburg, Idaho. And it is that track that Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow would go and walk around and hold hands, and that's where Chad would pretend to write his books in his later years. So there's some weird overlap here. In fact, found out that I believe it was Aaron who worked at a haunted house in Rexburg. I searched for haunted houses in Rexburg because I was just curious, because those who have been following the Daybell case may recall that Garth and a friend both worked at the Haunted Mill. So I looked up to see how many haunted house type places are there. There's the Haunted Mill, that's like more of a haunted house, and then there's like a corn maze, and it's called like the Haunted Forest or something like that. So it sounds like he might have worked at the same place. Haunted Mill sounds like the only haunted house, like indoor place. Anyway, weird overlap between our cases here. So Aaron, he got a bachelor's degree from BYU, Idaho in political science. He also served a mission for the church. He served in the Nevada's Las Vegas West mission. We found out also that he had his youngest brother, Micah, has autism, and that Aaron was just so sweet and so kind and was the buddy that Micah needed. There were five siblings. About 17 years ago, an 8-month-old little brother died in a drowning accident. So these are parents who have now lost 2 children tragically. One as an infant in a horrible accident, and one from murder, from the absolute betrayal of a friend. So horrible. Thought it was sweet. 2 of his siblings are Luke and Lorelai, and I have to wonder if they were named, perhaps, after 2 of our favorite characters from Gilmore Girls. Who knows? Aaron graduated with his degree in political science, and he thought maybe he would go on to law school, maybe he would go on to go to grad school, something. He had an intern with a law office, decided law school's not for me, I want to go to grad school. Maybe I'll teach civics in high school and then later become a political science professor someday. So he signed up to take the graduate test for the state of Georgia. He did that. The morning he did that, this was November 11th of 2022. Yes, the day. The day. He had taken the test and he was in such a great mood. He called his girlfriend and family and said, "Guys, I aced it. This is awesome." So he was planning on going to grad school in Georgia. So he was driving to Alabama from Georgia to visit his girlfriend, who he had known since they were teenagers. She gave a statement in court also saying they met at a church camp. And the way she described it, she's also a member of the church. I'm guessing it might have been a ward or stake youth conference. She said that they were planning on spending time and all eternity together, which would mean being married and sealed in the temple. So very, very sweet couple. He was supposed to stop at his friend Brandon's house and stay there overnight, and then go over to drive to Alabama to visit his girlfriend named Charlie Girl. How cute is that? In Alabama. And Brandon's parents are out of town. He's living with them at this point. Again, he's gone to BYU, Idaho, and I'm not sure if he had flunked out or just was taking a break. He was a little younger, a year or two younger than Aaron. He was home and his parents were gone. What happened next is that's the horrible part. Now the audio went wonky a bit. You have some voiceover. So here, Brandon took Aaron to a bar. Keeping in mind, as Latter-day Saints, we don't drink alcohol. So this was very out of character. What we do know is that Brandon ordered high alcohol content beers and that Aaron had alcohol in his blood when his body was found. How that happened I wonder if there was, if perhaps Brandon was dealing with some mental issues, anxiety, depression, or at least pretending to at that point, because he was premeditating the death of his friend, and we'll get to why in a little bit. But this is all his plan to kill his friend. To get him drunk would help make it easier, essentially. So I wonder if Brandon convinced Aaron to drink as a way to appease him. Like, oh, I'm so depressed, please just do this for me. Something along those lines. Please be a friend, and guilting him into drinking some alcohol, because if you don't, then what if I'll hurt myself? Or something along those lines. We don't know why, just that he did drink some alcohol, and then that was very out of character. They go back to Brandon's place, or his parents' place, and Aaron goes to bed, falls asleep. Now, keeping in mind, Brandon at this point, he has been planning to kill basically his childhood best friend. He has served a mission as well, and I'm forgetting where that was. He had a lot of challenges on his mission because of some of his mental illnesses, and it sounds like it was there he was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. And schizoaffective disorder is essentially schizophrenia and a mood disorder, the presence of both. So often is bipolar and schizophrenia together. So this kid has Tourette's, OCD, schizoaffective disorder, and some of these diagnoses don't come about till he's an adult, which is problematic for so many reasons. One hallmark of schizophrenia is having delusions and hallucinations. The delusions can be paranoia. When he dabbled in weed and alcohol, it made him hallucinate messages from God that he had to do bad things. And it gave him these urges, homicidal urges. And this is one of those things where I want to say, okay, for anyone who believes that there is a greater power, if there is a God, whatever you want to call it, can we agree that he's not going to be telling us to kill people? Can we just agree on that? That's not a thing. That'd be great. But he believed that he had to do one of two things. Sleep with his stepmother, okay, or kill Aaron. And he thought, well, I would find less pleasure in killing my friend, so I'll pick that one. Yeah. When he was doing weed and alcohol, that's when these urges would come up. Which to me, mental illness or not, with his religious beliefs, he knew that he shouldn't be doing those things. And if he's doing those things and then suddenly getting quote-unquote revelation, he's got to know that's not real revelation if it's coming through bad alcohol, bad drugs, doing things that you, in your heart, believe are wrong already. Aaron is then asleep. Brandon has a knife. They never found the weapon, a knife, blade of some kind, and stabbed Aaron horrifically. Initially, I read an early report that said he had been stabbed about 20 times. In his sentencing, the prosecutor says he was stabbed like 40 times, like double. And she apparently showed to the court, but so it was not streamed to the public, fortunately, that most of his wounds You could tell the heart was still pumping, body was still bleeding, which meant that during the commission of most of these wounds, he was still alive. Brandon later said that it was hard to watch his friend. It felt like it was taking forever for him to die, and it's hard to see his friend in pain. Brandon proceeds once his best friend from childhood is now dead, and his blood all over the carpet, soaked through the carpet. Brandon drags his body into one of the bathrooms in the house, where he proceeds to attempt to dismember him. He fails. He attempts, apparently, in his stomach, manages to get a piece of the small intestine out, which apparently was found in a completely different place from where the body was, the rest of the body. He also, it looks like he tried to dismember, starting with one of the arms. He couldn't do much there either. So he puts his friend into a suitcase and lugs him into the trunk of his car. Yeah. The next day, he searches for things like sheets, blankets, stain remover, and hydrochloric acid. Does a Google search, does Walmart carry duct tape? How to clean blood out of carpet. How to drain a washing machine. How to get over guilt. Things like that. Anyone who uses an iPhone knows you can tell what order, like when a note was created, and they're all usually listed in the order of the most recently updated or the most recently edited or revised. He had a note he had created and updated since Aaron's murder that included things like vacuum, do laundry, post music on YouTube. He had his own little music YouTube channel, and we'll get to some creepy things there in a moment. Apply for BYU Hawaii. Make sure to shower in my own bathroom. So not the one where he dismembered or tried to dismember his friend. And then to make sure to text his stepmother. And later on we find out he was trying to lay an alibi. The next morning is when people start wondering, well, where's Aaron? He was supposed to show up at Charlie Girl's house. She's the one who first starts going, wait, he's not here. He was supposed to be here this morning. Where is he? Brandon is making excuses. Oh, actually, no, he drove back home to his parents' house to pick up his Nintendo Switch. Someone else says, well, where is he? Oh, his battery on his cell phone died. Oh, actually, he was feeling suicidal. So maybe he went and did something to himself. And that one, everyone was like, dude, no, of all things, because so much is going good for him right now. Everything was going great. And when Charlie Girl says, I am going to come down and start looking for him, then he's like, oh crap, I gotta start figuring stuff out, and starts cleaning the apartment poorly. And his parents, too, are getting very concerned, obviously. The night after, this whole day happens, he's watching horror movies. He takes Aaron's which was actually his father's. He was borrowing it. And his original plan was to put some bricks on the gas pedal and have it drive itself into some water. I believe it was like a pond type area. The evening had been so difficult and so tiring, I guess, that he decided and just pushed it and let it kind of just roll into the pond. But when the car was found, then the police, they find out who owns the car, of course, and they call Aaron's parents. And they're like, well, we found this car. And they're like, whoa, what's happened to our son? Meanwhile, Charlie Girl is also freaking out. So they're connecting. Parents and Charlie Girl, they go to try to look for him in Georgia. A couple of things about the actual event. Prosecutor Leah Mayo said Aaron didn't have any defensive wounds. She says, quote, Aaron didn't see this coming. This was just not a case of mutual combat or something like that. He had no defensive wounds. It just happened out of nowhere. He was asleep, and then all of that. Brandon later said, quote, I became a carnal animal like in a dream and started to feel emotion for the first time as I started killing Aaron. Which is just horrifying. So eventually, he buries Aaron's body under a few inches of dirt near a fallen oak tree. in an area of Rome, Georgia. As I said, the small intestine section was found somewhere else later on. And then he gets the car pushed into or rolls into a river or a creek or a pond or whatever it was. When the family realizes he's missing, his mother Sarah posted this to Facebook. She said, "Help. We cannot get a hold of our son, Aaron Davis. The police in Rome, Georgia, just called my husband saying that his car was found in a ditch in Rome, Georgia. He was supposed to be in Gadsden, or Alabama. If you know anything, please let us know." So they're clearly in a panic. After he ditched the car and buried Aaron's body, he went to visit urgent care to take care of some cuts on his fingers. Cute. He posted, as per his to-do list, a song. Here's some of the lyrics. The prosecutor Mayo repeated in court that they believe he wrote describing Aaron's actual death. He screamed till he choked on his own tongue and blood. His scream became a gargle as he swallowed his tongue. To get an idea of what his mindset was prior to the murder, he had a song with these lyrics. "It doesn't matter what you do. Go kill someone. Go love someone. You can't plan the future. God decided it for you." Let me just say, predestination is not one of the beliefs in Latter-day Saint theology. Free choice is one of the bedrock foundations that we have. So, no. So Prosecutor Mayo commented on those specific lyrics, saying if they're indicative of his philosophy, that's dangerous because then there's no free will, everything's predestined, there's no consequences for actions, and there's no reason to ever exercise restraint. It's also a philosophy that doesn't demonstrate remorse. Amen. Well said, Prosecutor Mayo. The professionals believe that the urges were stronger as Brandon's parents were gone, that when they were home, they were less likely to be able to take control. But it sounds like this would have happened regardless at some point because he was planning this for some time. The police come to the door and they ask permission to search the place, and he, I guess trying to act innocent, says sure, gives them permission. They come through and it's very clear he couldn't clean it up well. But he's like, oh no, now they're suspecting me, so he fled. He later turned himself in. So I gotta give him a little credit for that, I suppose. He was officially charged with Aaron's murder in January of 2023, so about 2 months after the death of Aaron Davis. He was in jail then for about 1.5 years. He pled guilty just last month, June of 2024. And then he was sentenced July 18th. At the sentencing, there were statements from several friends. There was one friend who read a statement of his own, and as well as a couple of others from other friends he read aloud. It turns out Aaron has a sister who is currently on a mission. Sister missionaries served for 18 months, so that means he died before she left. But she sent a letter to be read, and both of his parents spoke, and it was heartbreaking. So I wanted to read a couple of quotes from his parents. Sarah said, and this is again in the sentencing, she says, "I've cooked and served Brandon thousands of dinners over the years, and he slept over at my house many, many times. He seemed to spend more time at my house than his own. Aaron was always so kind to Brandon. He was all the while planning to murder my son while I was cooking for him, taking him out to eat, taking him to the fair." Aaron's father, Randy, also spoke. He talked about how Aaron's death had affected him, and he apparently was serving in the bishopric at the time of Aaron's death. That is part of the leadership of a ward or congregation, and it's, again, lay ministry. This is not his profession. There's will be the bishop and then 2 counselors is the bishopric. So he sounds like he was one of the 2 counselors. And being in the bishopric is a very time consuming calling, and you're not paid for it. It's volunteers. It's something you do typically for about 5 years-ish until the people on the stake level who's the next geographic size up decide to release you and call someone else. He was so stressed out and just devastated over his son's murder that he needed to be released from his calling. He lost a lot of his work. He couldn't do his work. They had a lot of financial issues as a result, and all of that. And then, as I said, his girlfriend, Charlie Girl, spoke. So here's something that she said that was very touching. She said, "When I received the news that Aaron was dead, after running all through Rome in the freezing cold looking for my love, I collapsed outside of a gas station in front of an ice machine and I could not stop screaming. I never got to say goodbye. I never got to hold his hand or touch his face one more time or touch his hair or hug him. I got to kiss a cold casket and hoped he knew how much I dearly loved him." She said how hard it was because it was just one more blow when they were not allowed to see his body for their own sake because it was just too disfigured. And that was hard. She questioned how Brandon could possibly have killed his best friend, saying that it's very likely that he would have been the groomsman at their wedding. And then she read a note, a little love note, that Aaron had written to her. She read it in court, and these are Aaron's words. "Even if the flap of a butterfly's wing causes one of us to die in an accident, or 1,000 monsters manage to bring me down, we'll always have back then, and I would rather spend the rest of my life missing you than never having known you." This is a good kid. We have Brandon's parents, who I'm sure were just felt as if they'd just been slapped across the face, just completely broadsided with this whole thing, and just devastated in their own way. His father, Jeremy, said to the judge, he says, "We ask for your compassion and understanding, and recognizing the profound impact his mental health had on his behavior. What you'll never see is the joy he brought into our lives the day he was born. He's a kind and gentle person who never ever showed a sign of violence in his life. Until now." And then it was horrific violence. He goes on saying, "He showed kindness. He was part of the Davis family." And that's what makes the betrayal that much worse. It's someone you trusted as family. Someone who never showed violence and then took the life of your child in the most brutal fashion. Jenny Lee, Brandon's mother, said, "I don't know what happened that tragic night. I still have a hard time believing that Brandon could do this. My child is kind and a loving human being who suffers from severe mental illness that was not recognized and dealt with in time to save 2 very good people's lives, Aaron Davis and my son." I do see her side for sure. I don't know what the laws are like in Georgia, if insanity is even a defense. If his mental illness had been treated properly, would we be here? However, there's the other element that even if was the only violent thing he had ever done, it sounds like it was, who's to say he wouldn't do something like this again? Who's to say he wouldn't do weed or alcohol or whatever it is, or if they get his mental health stable, but then he stops taking his meds, which is incredibly common, especially with schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder. There's another case that I'll cover sometime relatively soon of a Latter-day Saint man. He's in prison for killing his wife, and he has no memory of doing it. The best he can come up with is he was sleepwalking. And as tragic and as horrifying as that case truly is, because from you look at victimology, you looked at profiling, the case makes no sense unless it is something like that. Then isn't he still where he belongs? Because isn't he still a danger to society? Wouldn't he still be a danger if he falls asleep and anyone is in his home, or if he can get out of the house while he's sleeping, isn't he still a danger? Brandon's father said that, yes, I think my son can be rehabilitated. And I thought, rehabilitated from what? He's not like, in his own words, he's not like a bad, evil person who needs to be taught right from wrong. He knows right from wrong. He just allowed delusions and paranoias to make him take another person's life, his friend's life, in such a brutal fashion. So I don't think he can be rehabilitated in that sense. So the question in the sentencing was not, guilt or innocence. He had pled guilty. The question was either 30 years to life with the possibility of parole, or a life sentence and no possibility of parole. So after hearing both sides, he took his recess, came back. He did give Brandon a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. I watched the entire hearing. It was maybe 2.5 hours-ish long. And the judge was very kind, very compassionate. I was very impressed. Aaron's father, he even said, "Tell me what his personality was like. What was your son like?" And then he was able to say, "Oh, my son loved to read philosophy and Dostoevsky and talk about big ideas, and he loved movies." The judge just loved hearing those small details. The sweetness and compassion in his face when he heard the love letter that Aaron had written to Charlie Girl. I have respect for, his name is Judge John, I want to say Nitrak, I'm not sure. But I thought I would finish with his words. Again, showing his compassion and at the same time understanding what needed to happen at the end of the hearing after he had given his sentence. To have a young son brutally murdered is unfathomable. I hope you're fond and loving memories of Aaron and your faith. So he actually has some respect for the faith of both sides, which is my faith. So I appreciate that. So again, I hope your fond and loving memories of Aaron and your faith will provide you some comfort as your life continues. God bless everybody in the courtroom. And to that I say amen. Thank you, Judge. This whole case, I've been watching it since Aaron went missing. And I have kids who are basically that age. And it's heartbreaking. And I feel for that family, for both sides. But yeah, justice was served. I feel terrible for Brandon for whatever happened in his head to make that possible. But the world has lost a wonderful young man who had a great future ahead of him. That is absolutely tragic. So, thank you for watching to the end. I really appreciate it. If you're still here, let me know what you think in the comments. Drop some chocolate emojis down there, because I know I'm getting a little weepy here. I could probably use a little bit of sugar to cheer me up. Let me know what you think about this case. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Give the video a like, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. And we'll catch you next time. Go get something sweet.